out because you're in the way of the pregnant woman. Gently stroking her belly. Alicia said that. But wouldn't a pregnant woman have a kinder expression? I wanted to ask, given how malicious Alicia's face looked. I took a quick glance at David. You can sleep in the storage room. Seeing David in agreement with Alicia, my lifelong love for him cooled instantly. Yet a touch of sentiment remained, leaving me a bit melancholic. Alright then. In response to my words, David happily took Alicia's hand. Alicia gazed dreamily at David, kissing them like that made the melancholy vanish, replaced with anger welling up from deep within. I'll leave by tomorrow. Oh, maybe you should stay out tonight? After all, this is now mine and Alicia's home. Overjoyed, David said, and I nodded slightly before leaving the house. They won't be laughing for long. After leaving the house, I imagined what was next and cracked a smile. My name's Catherine Taylor. I'm a 46-year-old housewife. Before marriage, I worked intensely, but that was over 20 years ago. Nowadays, I enjoy doing daily chores and sipping coffee. Just an ordinary middle-aged lady. But my hobby is investing. I've been doing it since before marriage. Patiently, I've been earning significant dividends, treating myself to lavish hotel brunches and spa visits, leading a pretty elegant life. My husband David is 40 years old, a salesman for a major company. He's gained quite a bit of weight, and frankly, he's been rather smelly lately. But he's good with words, given his profession. He may look big, but I loved him. I felt he should probably lose some weight for health reasons, but he had this cute mascot-like appeal, so I didn't see the need to force him into a diet. David and I have a daughter. Emily inherits David's features. She's slim, almost model-like in beauty. Not just in appearance, she's academically top of her class and excels in sports, even making it to national competitions. She's also humble and works hard. It feels like we, the geese, gave birth to a swan. Both David and I dote on Emily, and we've often been told we're overprotective. David has a bit of a weak spot for younger women, but he chose to marry an older woman like me and cherished our family. So, I thought a little wandering gaze here and there was inevitable. We lived in a condo we bought around the time Emily was born, but it was getting old and they were considering raising the maintenance fees recently. Amidst all this, Emily decided to share an apartment near her college. At the same time, one of my relatives approached us about inheriting a now vacant house. David and I decided to renovate that house and move there. Oh, but who could have known that this would cause issues between David and me, which had been smooth sailing up until then? The condo we had was a 4-bedroom, including a guest room, but the new house is just 2-bedroom. Although it's smaller than before, considering our retirement, we made it a single story, and it's been very comfortable. One of the rooms, which serves as a study and a guest room, can be divided to make an additional room for Emily if she ever comes back. David started coming home late every night due to work dinners, and somehow always found reasons to go out even on weekends. Sleeping next to David, who'd come home reeking of alcohol and cigarettes, was unbearable for me, even if we had separate beds. Because of that, even though we originally shared a bedroom, I've been sleeping in the study ever since we moved. When it came time to send out moving announcements, I mailed letters to various places. David isn't good with that sort of thing, so I sent letters on his behalf to his family and relatives. As for me, since my parents have passed away, I simply wrote a brief note and sent it to friends and relatives on my mother's side. I haven't been in contact with any relatives from my father's side because of my half-sister Alicia. Alicia is my half-sister, 14 years younger than me. When I was in 7th grade, my mother passed away, and about 6 months later, my father remarried. Alicia was born to him and his new wife. At the time of their marriage, Alicia was already 2 years old, so I initially thought it was a union of two families with kids. For about 5 years into their marriage, my father and his new wife were involved in an accident and never returned. At their funeral, relatives from my dad's side told me that he and his new wife had been childhood friends, and everyone had always thought they would end up together. But my mom had set them up through boss, and my dad felt he couldn't refuse. That left his childhood friend out in the cold. But to think that behind their smiles, my dad had a child with his second wife was a huge shock to me. Every time we had a family gathering, Asha's favorite foods were served. She had brand name clothes, and she got the biggest room all to herself. If she said she wanted to go somewhere, they'd take her immediately. Meanwhile, I was burdened with all the chores, from preparing meals to doing laundry. I had to work part-time jobs, and all the money I earned was taken away. I also had a small storage room under the stairs, and I had to beg for even basic necessities. By the time Alicia was in elementary school, she had heard about my mom from the relatives and started looking down on me. I worked several part-time jobs to save money and finally moved out. I moved out. It was impossible for me to harbor any positive feelings towards Alicia, and I never told her about my marriage or that I had a child. A few weeks after moving, I was having tea and relaxing when the doorbell rang. When I answered, a man's voice mumbled delivery, and on the screen was a person looking down. I thought maybe David had ordered something and opened the door only to be left speechless. "Oh, Alicia, why are you here? Hi sis, long time no see. Just thought I'd drop by." Well, Alicia was wearing the hat I saw on the intercom. She wasn't a delivery person, but my half-sister. Not waiting for a response, she walked past me, entered the living room, and sat down on the couch. I followed her in a hurry, stood in front of her, and looked down. "And I figured you wouldn't open the door if you knew it was me, so I used a recorded voice. That's just low. Geez, you're scary." I raised my voice at Alicia, and she feigned fear in an exaggerated way. However, it was clear that she was just putting on a show, and the proof was that Alicia had a smirk on her face. "I came for a visit." "What?" Asha, speaking nonsense, got a cold response from me. Yet she grinned and started explaining the reason for her unexpected visit. But sis, you never even told me where you live. I got married, but my husband is always on business trips, and it's getting boring. Plus, once my belly starts getting bigger, moving around becomes a hassle, right? Or everyone told me to come stay with you, or to go home. I don't even want anything to do with you. Well, too bad. I already came here planning to stay with you. Listening to Alicia's audacious words only irked me further. I muttered, typical of a kleptomaniac's daughter. Hearing that, my anger reached its peak. Get out. I never want to see your face again. What's all the fuss about? People outside can hear you. David, Felicians. I was at a loss for words, surprised by David's unexpected return at such an odd hour. As I struggled to explain, Asha stood up and walked over to David, intertwining her arm with his. David didn't seem to mind. In fact, he looked quite pleased. Oh, Alicia's here. Welcome. David, and my sister was being mean. I thought it'd be nice to stay with you until the baby is born, but is that okay? Ends of your course, I'd be thrilled. If you're okay with it, you can stay as long as you want. I was left dumbfounded, mouth agape, watching the exchange between David and Alicia. A closeness between them was more like that of lovers than siblings-in-law. David, what's going on? Sheesh, don't be so cold to her. Are you just jealous of your cute little sister? David's words left me speechless. I confided in him about my family situation before our marriage. And yet he dared to say such things. Plus, we have a spare bed in the guest room. He can stay there. Really? Can I sleep in the same room with you? David, it might be nice to dream with Alicia by my side. Oh, David, you're so sweet. Their mushy conversation was giving me a headache. Exons ignoring me. The two of them went to the bedroom arm in arm to put away their belongings. But when they didn't return after several minutes, I had a bad feeling and peeked into the room. There they were embracing each other. Living with Alicia feels like a dream come true. A baby's thrilled too. Living with Daddy. But the word Daddy from Alicia's mouth stunned me. David's the father? David, looking elated, nodded and hugged Alicia. Let's ask Sis to babysit, so we can go on a date. Yeah, that's about the only use for her now. As they kissed, I watched through the crack in the door, tears streaming down my face. From that day on, they began treating me like a housemaid. I complied, but I started gathering evidence against them. The revelations I uncovered were shocking, leading me to contemplate divorce. One day, Asha plopped down on my favorite sofa and beckoned me. Her tone was authoritative, as if she owned the place. You're in the way of a pregnant woman. Get out. As she gently stroked her belly, the spiteful look on her face made me wonder. Aren't pregnant women supposed to look gentler? I shot a glance at David. You can sleep in the shed. David sighed with Alicia. Any lingering feelings I had for him evaporated. Still, a touch of sadness remained fine. David happily took Alicia's hand in response. Alicia was gazing at David completely smitten. Their affectionate exchange made me realize any tenderness I felt earlier was gone, replaced by a deep-rooted anger. "I'll leave tomorrow." "Good, maybe you can find somewhere else to stay tonight. This is now my and Alicia's home." The kid. David didn't notice as I gave a subtle nod and left the house. Enjoy laughing while you still can. Stepping outside, a grin formed on my face as I pondered what lay ahead. I checked into a hotel that night and made plans for the next phase. The next day, I scheduled a moving company to help out and planned to go to the city hall first thing in the morning before heading back home. That night, excited thoughts of the days to come. Eagle of the days to come kept me awake. But feeling a newfound freedom, my spirit was high. But to my surprise, the moving company had already arrived and looked confused. They told me when they got there, the house was empty except for a single cardboard box by the entrance. Sure enough, a small box was there with a note saying, "Feel free to take it." Etched inside were some of my cherished books and cosmetics, carelessly thrown in. The books had bent corners, and some pages were torn. And to top it off, at the bottom of the box was David's wedding ring. I was seething with anger. Upon entering the house, I found crumpled bedsheets, pajamas, and underwear everywhere, quickly realizing what had transpired after I left. "Please pack all of this stuff for me." I closed the bedroom door and led the movers to the study. Since David didn't read, the study was packed with books that Emily and I had collected over the years. I didn't own many clothes and decided this was a good time for a wardrobe refresh. Then in the living room, I found a note on the dining table. The note mentioned that David and Alicia were going on a 6-day trip abroad, asked for the house to be cleaned during their absence, and stated that the divorce would be finalized as soon as they returned. His utter self-centeredness left me dumbfounded. However, his absence made executing my plan much easier, and secretly, I was grateful. I had the movers pack all my belongings and left David's wedding ring on the kitchen counter. And that, I left the house. After some thought, I bought a place near Emily's university that happened to be on sale. At the one-bedroom apartment was very cozy, and I relished the solitude. On the day David and Alicia were to return, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I didn't even need to check to know who it was. Without lifting my eyes from my book, I answered, "Hello. Hey. What the hell is going on?" David shouted, sounding completely frantic. While the reason was clear, I responded nonchalantly. "What do you mean what's going on? Don't play dumb. Our house is gone." I couldn't help but burst out laughing, hearing David fuming on the other end. After a hearty chuckle, I replied, "Well, it was my house, and I thought if I'm not gonna live there, why keep it? We were living there, weren't we? What about our stuff?" "Oh, don't worry. Everything's safely stored in a storage unit. I'll text you the location and access code." "You've gotta be kidding me. Bring back our house now? You sure have a funny way of seeing things. That lands under my name. Actually under my name, and so is the house." Even the money used to build it was from my investments, not a dime from you. Ah! David seemed to finally recall the time the house was built. When I had consulted with David about whether to renovate or rebuild, he had thrown up his hands saying, "I don't have money right now. If you want to use yours, go ahead." So, I took care of all the arrangements and payments by myself and built the house to my taste. But David, influenced by Alicia, had completely forgotten about it. Come on. The baby's gonna be your niece or nephew. Do something about the house. Alicia's in a tough spot. My niece or nephew? If there's someone out there who'd be fond of a child resulting from their spouse's affair, I'd sure like to meet them. What are you saying? You thought I didn't know? It seemed David really believed I was in the dark about it all. His formerly assertive demeanor changed completely. I pressed on. I've known about your relationship with Alicia from the day she barged into our house. Since then, I've been gathering evidence. Evidence? That high-end baby monitor Alicia had me buy when she was throwing a fit. It's been recorded. Surprised? David let out a small "what's in" response. The baby monitor was among the first things Alicia demanded when she moved in. Having done her research, she had asked for a luxury one costing several $1,000s. Initially refused, but after being yelled at by David, I reluctantly bought it. But David and Alicia never bothered to check its settings after buying it. So, without them knowing, I had it recording everything that happened in the bedroom. Being expensive, it sure did capture everything clearly, even in the pitch dark. Both of you in bed, and all the things you did there. What? That's an invasion of privacy. At least I was just testing the baby monitor's capabilities. It's still better than a man who cheats with his wife's sister, don't you think? David seemed at a loss for words. I continued cheerfully. Oh, by the way, I think the mailbox is still there. Can you check it for me? The mailbox? Yes. I expect something's already been delivered. I heard David checking the mailbox over the phone, followed by a sharp intake of breath. It seems the certified mail arrived. So, about the payment. Hold on. There's one here for Alicia too. Are you extorting my sister-in-law? Why not? You both betrayed me, so it's compensation for that. Doesn't matter if she's family. But, no excuses. Talk to my lawyer from now on. Bye. Wait, Catherine. Ignoring David's plea, I hung up the phone. A barrage of calls followed, which I ignored. I'd already gotten a new phone over the past 5 days, so my old one was just for evidence. It wouldn't be an issue if I left it alone. David kept calling for about an hour, then seemed to give up. It appeared he had reached out to the attorney, who subsequently contacted me, sounding a bit wary. The next morning, I received a call on my new phone from a relative on my father's side. I didn't recall sharing my new number, so I figured Alicia must have sought their help, expecting them to scold me. Reluctantly, I started recording the call on my new phone and answered. Yes. How dare you kick out Alicia, who's pregnant? apologize to her right now and offer her a new house as compensation. Why should I apologize to the woman who had an affair with my husband? I don't know what Alicia told you, but the one who should apologize is Alicia, and she's the one who should pay compensation. Like father, like daughter. This is why you can't trust a kleptomaniac's child. That's right. After all, she's the child of a father who betrayed his wife and even had a child with his mistress. Being related by blood doesn't change the fact that she's a dim-witted girl who would fall for her sister's husband. Bad upbringing? I guess. What? Yes, and please tell Alicia to never get involved with me again. Though I doubt she'll have the chance. The relatives kept babbling, but I hung up on them. Etching out all the pent-up feelings felt really refreshing. I called my lawyer and decided to summon Alicia and David. That your revenge won't end until I see the dumbfounded looks on their faces. And so, we had our discussion at the lawyer's office. Asha looked utterly miffed, while David looked grumpy. It seemed like they had no intention of showing remorse. I didn't expect my sister to be such a money grubber. I'm so shocked. If I knew you were this greedy, I wouldn't have married you. I feel deceived. I was more astounded than angry at the self-centered comments from Alicia and David. I laid out the divorce papers in front of them, and then another set of papers, the marriage license. I can reduce the compensation if you sign these. If signing these is all it takes for a reduction, then hand them over. And David grabbed the pen for me and signed it. Alicia, smirking, signed too. I put them in a folder and gave them a big smile. I'll submit these to the county office. Did you forget, sis? I'm already married. They won't accept it. Oh, don't worry about that. You're already divorced. What? Alicia stared at me with a dumbfounded expression. I clarified for her. The divorce was finalized in mediation yesterday. I didn't know about this. Well, you kept throwing away your mail without checking it. There were several summonses. Your ex-husband told me that now he's going to deny the father-child relationship with the kid. Extemplified the shocked Alicia. David looked rather pleased. And why wouldn't he? If they wait out the restriction period, he can marry Alicia. It's like a dream come true for him. I smiled sweetly at David. It's going to be tough for you. You're raising another man's baby and all. The baby is mine. Oh, you didn't know, did you? Poor thing. Lying to the baby in Alicia's belly is apparently from her main boyfriend, a club promoter. Club promoter. David turned sharply towards Alicia, who looked away, clearly guilty. Seeing her reaction, David realized that what I said was true. He looked pale as a ghost. Between the compensation and the child support for another man's baby, you're gonna have your hands full. Good luck with that. Catherine, let's start over. I was wrong. Emily's still here. Just as David changed his tune, the door of the lawyer's office swung open, and a young woman stormed in. David went pale at the sight of her. Emily? Dad? You're the worst. Hurting Mom like that. I'm cutting ties with you. From now on, I'll live with Mom. You and that loose woman over there just disappear. Emily had never spoken so harshly before, leaving David frozen in shock. Meanwhile, Asha, feeling insulted, was shaking in rage, her face beet red. Who's the loose woman now? Going after sister's husband and spreading your legs for your main boyfriend, the club promoter? How can you say you're not promiscuous? Are you out of your mind? It seemed Alicia couldn't muster a response to Emily's outburst. I delivered the final blow to Alicia. Well, David may be stingy, but he doesn't save money. He easily spends it on young women, so watch out. But his house and car. Oh, they're all mine. Got them from my stock dividends. Just when we use them as a couple, but if we divorce, they're not his. Listen, no way. A guy making a mere $3,000 a month can afford that kind of card. $1,000. But he works for a major company. Apparently, she was after his money. She looked pale and stunned. David was also looking down, embarrassed that his low salary was revealed. Emily, that night having dinner with Emily for the first time in a long time, was truly delightful. I filed for divorce soon after, just around the time when Alicia's waiting period for remarriage had passed. David and Alicia also submitted their marriage license. The witness section had my signature, and that of Alicia's ex-husband. It seems that David was having an affair with Alicia at work and even skimmed off some travel expenses to fund their secret getaways, leading to him getting fired when the company found out. I heard through the grapevine that he's now juggling part-time jobs and barely making ends meet. Alicia seems to be taking care of the child, but given her impatient nature and having been dumped by her boyfriend because he didn't want anything to do with a woman running out of money, she appears to be spending her days in tears. The reason she pursued David was apparently out of jealousy. I had married and had kids before she did, and she wanted to sabotage that. With David working for a renowned company and having a substantial income. Asha thought that by claiming her boyfriend's child was David's, she could extract money from both her ex-husband and David. She believed she could also dump the child-rearing responsibilities on me while she frequented the club. After all this, it seems she's been shunned by the family. She tried working part-time, but with her attitude, it didn't last long. I heard David and the baby are now huddled together, living in a small one-room apartment. Emily is thoroughly enjoying her college life. I was surprised to find out that her roommate was her same-sex partner, but seeing a happy Emily made me think, well, that's fine. As for me, I've been leading a relaxed life with my stock dividends. Interestingly, after the divorce, I started communicating more with Alicia's ex-husband, and lately, he's been inviting me out for meals. I later found out that Alicia and her ex had an arranged marriage, pushed heavily by Alicia herself. Considering that, I often wonder what Alicia found unsatisfactory in him. He seems like such a decent guy. Initially, he used to address me as sister-in-law, but now he affectionately calls me Catherine. Just a while ago, I received a message from him on my phone. He said he has something important to talk about, so I can't help but feel a bit restless tonight. Actually answers, though I know I shouldn't get my hopes up, as I sat in front of my vanity, my face flushed like a smitten young woman. I changed the lock because the kid's noise is annoying. You can sleep in the garden with the baby. Coming back from a checkup with Rosetta, I called out to Kyle and was met with those unbelievable words. Come on, Kyle. Stop joking and unlock the door now. Even with an appointment, enduring the long wait at the doctor's office since morning. With my 3-month-old daughter, Rosetta was tiring. Just as I thought we were finally home, I realized the key wouldn't fit. That was his response when I asked him about it. I'm not joking. If you heard me, do as I said. I retorted defensively. Rosetta's only a 3-month-old baby. How can you say such cruel things? You think I'm the cruel one? That's my line. I come home exhausted from work, and all I hear is her constant crying. If she keeps crying even when I'm sleeping, it must be your fault. The yelling escalated. No matter how hard I tried to block it out, his hurtful words kept reaching my ears. Even though Rosetta is our child, I felt tears welling up. Just as I was about to speak up, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around, and standing there was... Then a savior appeared for us. My name is Hannah O'Donnell, 24 years old. I gave birth to our beloved daughter, Rosetta, 3 months ago with my husband, Kyle, 28. I met Kyle at a mixer I was somewhat reluctantly invited to by a friend. After his relentless pursuit, we started dating and eventually got married. In our 2nd year of marriage, I became pregnant with our long-awaited child, Rosetta. Our first date was near a rosary, which was beautiful every year. That spot became our regular meeting point. Therefore, we named our daughter Rosetta. When I announced my pregnancy, Kyle cried tears of joy. I was filled with hope and anticipation for a bright future with him. Those were the days. Even during times of morning sickness and poor health, he would care for me without sleeping. However, as I entered my stable pregnancy period, Kyle's behavior began to change. I'm naturally petite and slender, but the baby in my belly felt heavier than I anticipated, and even slight movements drained my energy. I wasn't exactly sighing, but I'd occasionally let out a small sigh after certain tasks. Seriously? Another sigh? Do you regret having our baby? No, Kyle. It's not a sigh, it's just the baby's heavy. Kyle mistakenly thought my slight exhales were sighs of regret, and no matter how many times I tried to explain, he wouldn't understand. As from there, things became strained. He would come home late, not telling me where he was, and I spent anxious nights, especially as the due date approached. I see. I think Kyle's jealous of the baby, and that's why he's upset. Do you think so? He was head over heels for you. Hannah, maybe he feels neglected. I'm sure he'll come around once. He'll come around once the baby's born. Is that so? The one laughing and listening to my story is my sister. Rose. She's the one I rely on the most, and she's always been my greatest ally. Rose has a husband named Luke, who's 3 years older than her. Our family owns a traditional bakery in Nebraska. Luke, who fell in love with our bakery's pastries, insisted on apprenticing under our father, taking over after our mother passed away. Luke also fell for Rose and married her. He became a part of our family. Apparently, Luke's father is a CEO of a major company, but Luke had no intentions of taking over. Marrying Rose was okay. Initially, his family opposed the marriage, but now even his dessert-loving father has become a fan of our family's pastries. I haven't met Luke's father yet, but I've heard he's a strict businessman. Sorry for the detour, but I had been discussing Kyle's recent behavior with Rose. That said, I wasn't staying with my family. My traditional-minded father wasn't thrilled about my whirlwind romance that started at a mixer, so it kept my distance from my family home. For that reason, most of our talks were either when Rose visited me or via video chat. That day, as the baby was due soon, I received some traditional pastries and had Rose come over. Kyle had always enjoyed the pastries from my family's shop, so Rose was like, why not use these to get on his good side, and gave some to me. I received a cheer from Rose, saying, like, good luck with making up. As I was feeling well that day, I made some of Kyle's favorite dishes and planned to enjoy the pastries after dinner, setting them on a small plate and waiting for him to come home. Team sexual around 9 o'clock, I heard the sound of the front door unlocking, and for the first time in a while, I went to greet him at the entrance. Welcome home, Kyle. A night, you know. As I approached the entrance, I was taken aback. Kyle, completely drunk, was brought home by a group of men and women. Though Ava, Kyle was clinging to one of the women's shoulders. Kyle, we're here. Come on, let me go. The woman seemed a bit tipsy and didn't seem to notice me. What a lovely house. It's so nice. She looked around curiously after laying Kyle down on the floor. Who are you? Close. You scared me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Why are you in Kyle's house? Oh, are you the housekeeper? Tiny. Isn't that his wife we've heard about? Housekeeper? His wife they've heard about? Who are these people? But with my mind filled with questions, I tried to raise my voice just a bit. I'm Kyle's wife. It seems like you brought my husband home. My husband came home. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, are you his colleagues? First, the woman, either misunderstanding or just not caring, glanced at me and started saying something. Oh, so you're the wife. Kyle has been complaining, you know. He said you're quite the nag. Hey, stop that. Worry about her? We're Kyle's team members. We went out for drinks and he had a bit too much. We'll be going now. Goodbye. The man, perhaps sobering up, quickly grabbed the woman's arm and hurried out. Even though I didn't think they were much younger than us, I was taken aback by how lacking in common sense these young people seemed to be. That's true though, when it comes down to it. Kyle, passed out drunk on the floor, was probably to blame. I prepared a glass of water and tried to wake Kyle up. Kyle, wake up! You'll catch a cold sleeping here. But all I got in response was some mumbling, and he showed no signs of waking up. But with my baby bump, there was no way I could carry Kyle to the bedroom. So, I fetched a blanket, covered him with it, left a note on the dining table saying heat it up if you're gonna eat, and decided to rest in our bedroom for the baby's sake. I must have fallen asleep soon after I hit the sack, because I was jolted awake by a loud noise. The sound came from the dining area, so I got up holding my belly protectively to see what was going on. But to my horror, the dinner I'd prepared for Kyle, as well as the pastries Rose had brought, were scattered messily across the floor. And there, slumped over the table and muttering complaints, was Kyle. What time do you think it is? Knowing making all that racket is gonna bother the neighbors. So, look here. I've been working hard for you, alright. How can you talk to your husbands like that? Kyle, still sounding drunk and slurring his words, raised his voice. At Sector 6 base, I'm not saying you shouldn't drink, but our baby's coming soon, remember? Aren't you over the moon about it? What's gotten into you tonight? I made all your favorites and waited for you, and you go and make this mess. Come on, Kyle. You're gonna be a dad. I couldn't help but let my emotions spill over, and before I knew it, I was sobbing as I pleaded with him. But my feelings didn't seem to get through to Kyle. He just shouted enough and stormed out. We remained distant and misunderstood each other, and eventually, I gave birth to our daughter Rosetta. I wished he would remember the times when we first met. I named her Rosetta, partly in hopes of that, but Kyle never held her. Rose was the one who was there for me during the delivery. Rose loves kids, but couldn't have any of her own. That's why, taking a cue from Rose's name, I named our daughter Rosetta, hoping she would be loved by Rose as well. As Rosetta has a heartwarming smile, and her laughter brings joy to our home. And her laughter and smiles became my anchor. However, her crying at night was intense, and I often found myself protecting Rosetta from an enraged Kyle, not getting a wink of sleep. If she cries and fusses in the middle of the night again, I'll kick both of you out. I'd gotten used to hearing such threats, but this can't go on. It's not fair to Rosetta. I had also prepared for the worst-case scenario in the back of my mind. Then, 3 months passed since Rosetta was born. Today was her checkup, so I spent my morning in the waiting room of the clinic. Even though I had an appointment, I had to wait for about 40 minutes. After the checkup, I was completely drained from the lack of sleep, and I felt totally beat. Rosetta, we're finally done. Let's head home and rest. I hurried home, talking to Rosetta all the way. We did great, didn't we? We're home now. All right, let's just, I reached the front door and tried to unlock it. Wouldn't it fit? I tried to insert the key into the lock, but it wouldn't go in no matter how many times I tried. It just wouldn't open. It worked just fine when I left earlier. I reluctantly knocked on the door. I knew Kyle was home since it was his day off. Yes. Oh, Kyle? Sorry, for some reason the key won't go in and I can't open the door. Can you help me out? What? You're back already. Just in time. What are you talking about? I changed the lock because the kid's noise is annoying. You can sleep in the garden with the baby. You changed the lock? Open up. I want to get Rosetta some rest. No way. Didn't I tell you? If she cried one more time, I'd kick you out. Come on. Rosetta is just a 3-month-old baby. How could I possibly let her sleep outside? Enough. Looks like I care. I'm not gonna let that baby waste any more of my time. You and your inability to take care of her can just get lost. Hey, Kyle. Ignoring my pleas. Kyle stopped talking to me. No matter how many times I knocked, he ignored it. It seemed he even powered off his phone. I couldn't even hear the ringtone anymore. This can't be happening. I was at a loss, taken aback by what just happened. Regardless, I needed to find a place for Rosetta to rest, so I started to walk away from the house. I couldn't go back to my parents. My father hasn't even seen Rosetta's face yet. If he found out I was locked out, who knows what he'd say. My trustworthy sister, Rose, had mentioned she'd be out at a meeting today. So I couldn't contact her. For now, I thought of taking refuge at a diner. However, exhausted from the lack of sleep, I stumbled. Then, "Hey lady, are you alright?" When I turned around, an elderly man stood there with a concerned look on his face. A bit further, there was a black car parked. I promise I'm not a threat. I was driving by and saw you stumbling. I got concerned and thought I'd check if you're alright. Oops, if the man had apparently gotten out of his car to make sure I didn't find him threatening. Thank you. As I began to speak, tears started to stream down my face. It seems like you're having some troubles, especially with a baby in your arms. Come on, get in the car. I have my female secretary with me. As the man raised his hand signaling, a poised woman stepped out of the car, took my bags and gently guided me to get inside. He was like, I can't believe this is happening. Once in the car, my embarrassment gave way to concern for Rosetta and I recounted the whole incident to the man. Thus the woman, whom he referred to as his secretary, handed me a handkerchief. At the same time, the man presented his business card. I'm George O'Connor, the CEO here. Mr. O'Connor, wait, what? In his business card, my eyes widened in surprise. After listening to my story, George spoke up. Take care of this, okay? When George said that to his secretary, she picked up something and nodded, saying like certainly. I decided to call Kyle again to negotiate. And after what felt like dozens of rings, he finally answered. Geez, stop calling. I've told you, you're not coming back in. Just find some place to sleep with that kid. As expected, he wasn't going to let us in. So I replied like this. Alright, got it. Just remember, wherever we sleep, no complaints from you. Wait, what? With that, I hung up. We then began to drive away in George's car. If this is how you're gonna be, I won't hesitate for Rosetta's sake. In my heart, I murmured, preparing for the worst-case scenario I had in mind. Hannah, are you okay? I'm so sorry. I should have come with you to the doctor's appointment. Looking frantic, Rose burst into the room. You should have called the shot. Rose, I'm so sorry for worrying you. And for dragging Luke into this too. Don't say that. Rose's precious sister is also important to me. When I got the call from Dad, thank you so much, George, for helping my sister and Rosetta. Though I never imagined that the person I'd called out to was Rose's sister. Hannah, the world is a small place. The man who approached me was none other than the father of Luke, the husband of my sister Rose. I was thinking of visiting with Rosetta once things settled down, but I never thought our first meeting would be like this. And where Rosetta and I were, believe it or not, at George's place. For Rose, it's her father-in-law's house. I was brought to George's place by car, and they let Rosetta rest in a bed. While I was talking about my family, it turns out that Luke, who married Rose, is George's son. George was passing by in a car to pick up some traditional sweets for his valued customers and noticed me. So, George contacted Luke, who then rushed over with Rose. So, is it true? Kyle locked you out of the house. Yeah. I can't believe he told me to sleep outside when Rosetta was there. Babies cry all the time. It's unacceptable. I nod slowly. I told everything to Rose and Luke. Why would he go to the extent of changing the lock just to kick out Hannah and Rosetta? What do you mean? If he just wanted to get rid of you because of Rosetta's crying at night, he could have just put on a door chain, right? He's at work during the day, so you wouldn't run into him. Which means he has a reason for not wanting Hannah and Rosetta in the room. If only we could see inside the room, we might get some clues. Oh, we can see the living room. There's a baby monitor camera I installed for Rosetta. Recalling, we all peered into the camera connected to my smartphone. What's this? So, that's what's going on. How inappropriate. George, who'd been silent, frowned in confusion. X on the screen. Kyle was seen playing with a woman in a compromising position on the couch. I recognized that woman. She was the young lady who once introduced herself as Kyle's team member and brought a drunk Kyle home. I can't believe it. Blaming Rosetta's crying at night and kicking us out for this. I was seething with anger, and my body started to shake. I'll never forgive him. I decided to take action against Kyle. It had been a week since Kyle kicked me out, and I hadn't returned home when my cell phone rang. It was Kyle. He didn't want to hear that guy's voice, but I thought I might get an entertaining reaction, so I answered. Hello. Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? You call out of the blue and don't even greet me. That doesn't matter. Why the hell are you sending an attorney after me? Talking about divorce and paying compensation. Have you lost your mind? Oh, you've heard from the attorney, right? The child support for Rosetta. You'll be paying it until she turns 18. But of course the divorce comes first. Hold on. Why the sudden talk about divorce? Fam, You're the one who kicked us out. Yeah, I told you to get out, but I never said anything about getting a divorce. It's obvious that I would divorce you even without you saying it. I won't stay with a man who'd kick out his lovely daughter using the excuse of her crying at night just because he cheated. What? I never cheated. What evidence do you have? Are you stupid? The attorney is taking action because there's evidence. Don't think you can talk your way out of this. I'm not the same person who'd just listen and say nothing anymore. I firmly voiced my thoughts, asked the attorney to proceed with the divorce. At first, Kyle resisted, but with the evidence from the living room security camera and the confession from the other woman, he eventually accepted the divorce. We agreed to go through division of property. He also promised to pay the child support every month. If he fell behind, he agreed to pay the remaining amount in one lump sum as stipulated in our agreement. A while later, I got another call from Kyle. I've done my part for the divorce, all right? I'll pay the child support in no time. It's good to hear. Seems like you're quite confident about your finances, huh? Yeah. The CEO personally approached me the other day. He was like, I have something important to discuss with you soon. Man, my talent finally caught the attention of a major company's CEO. I'm definitely getting a promotion. Rotation, I'm saying goodbye to a shady woman like you with a child for good. I'll find a better woman and live the high life. And with that, Kyle continued to get carried away with his delusions that hadn't even come true. How could someone who's done wrong expect such good fortune? Well, as long as I could get what's owed to me, that's fine. I certainly didn't want to be with a loser like him. All I need is my lovely daughter Rosetta. Several months had passed since I divorced Kyle when I found myself in a certain place. Thanks for coming. What happened this time is unforgivable, both personally and for our company. I've looked into it thoroughly. Yes, I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience. Hannah, there's no need for you to apologize. If anything, you're the victim here. Make sure to witness everything. As George finished speaking, there was a knock at the door. Come in. That George's deep voice. A man entered, grinning and rubbing his hands together. Waits and Mike O'Connor. I've been eagerly waiting for your call. Oh, you have a guest? It was my ex-husband, Kyle, standing by the entrance. Kyle gaped as he glanced further into the room. Why are you here? He was flustered, but I simply stood up in his direction. It was a cold, detached gesture. Long time no see. But you, Mr. Kyle O'Donnell. Remember, you're in front of the CEO. Why? His face turned pale, and he looked comically flustered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Let me explain. This is Emma's Hannah Johnson. She's the younger sister of my son's wife, Rose. Small world, hun? Indeed. When I met George and saw his business card, I was shocked to see the name of Kyle's workplace on it. I was also surprised to learn that he was Rose's father-in-law. In short, I was in Kyle's boss's office. George had called me in, planning to exact retribution on Kyle for what he did to me and Rosetta. Moreover, you had an affair with your team member, and for such a disgraceful reason, kicked out Hannah and your daughter. Rosetta, how despicable. I know Maitre O'Connor. I swear, I've never done such a thing. I don't know what she told you, but I would never. Oh, so you're saying Hannah made up the affair? Yes. I would never do something so cruel. So you admit it's cruel? Of course. Then why did you tell me and Rosetta to sleep outside and change the lock? That was just a joke. But you took it seriously. You didn't even come back. Maybe you found another man. Fair enough. It's pathetic. But George became furious and pulled out a voice recorder from his pocket, playing back a recording of Kyle berating me. You've been recording me. Isn't this eavesdropping? I'm gonna sue you. My secretary recorded it. Plus, it's not eavesdropping. And after you kicked them out, they stayed at my place. In my wife's room. I told you, right? Don't complain wherever we sleep. Come on. Seriously? What about my promotion? My raise? The way that's happening. After you betrayed us by having an affair with a team member. That's not cheating because... Why don't you just accept it? George. Mr. O'Connor saw the footage from the living room security camera. It was truly disturbing. And the woman you were with, Carol, admitted the affair and resigned. Because your wife was cold to you, right? No way! My life's over. Kyle's dumbfounded scream echoed throughout the CEO's office. Thus, except Kyle was personally reprimanded by the CEO, George, who is also my sister's in-law. Anticipating a raise and promotion, Kyle walked into the CEO's office on cloud 9, only to find himself plummeting down to rock bottom. He'd splurged his money on his affair partner, postponing the child support. And according to the contract, he needed to pay the child support properly. Come on. Hannah, we had something special. Let's give it another go, huh? I promise I'll take care of the kid this time. I think we might reconcile and he could avoid the payments. Kyle tried to turn the tables. How dare you? What do you mean by kid? My daughter's name is Rosetta. Will Takano ever contact me again? It was outrageous. I regretting that I married such a person. I felt frustrated, ashamed, and profoundly sad. Ignoring Kyle's desperate pleas on the other end of the phone. But I pressed the end call button, blocking him. Later, my attorney informed me that Kyle's dismissal haunted him, preventing him from finding a new job. Trying to borrow money to pay me, he couldn't get a loan from reputable sources. Instead, he borrowed from shady individuals. But to repay his debt, he's working hard every day under their watchful eyes. I genuinely felt sorry for him. As for me, with the help of Rose and Luke, I managed to reconcile with my father and return to my family home. According to Luke, my father seemed to have been concerned about Rosetta and me, and he would quietly ask Luke, like, how are they doing? When Rose informed our father of the recent events, he was ready to confront Kyle in anger. That's your Pollux. When I returned with Rosetta after a long time, my father had a stern look on his face, standing imposingly. But when Rosetta gave him a bright smile, he said in a soft voice like, "Nice to meet you. I'm your grandpa." He took her hand and, looking a bit shy, reached out for her, suggesting that I should let him hold her. We finally put our differences aside after years of not speaking. Now my father is completely smitten with Rosetta, leaving his store in Luke's hands, buying toys and spending time playing with her. Thanks to this, I can now help Rose and Luke at the store. George and his wife started visiting us more frequently, helping to take care of Rosetta. It turns out they share some hobbies with my father, and they often hang out. Rose dotes on Rosetta, acting as a second mom to her. Even Luke claims like I'm your dad to Rosetta and showers her with affection. Thus on days off, the four of us often go to parks, brimming with love and care. Rosetta is growing up. Rosetta is growing up with a constant smile. I am looking forward to watching Rosetta grow surrounded by my warm family. I live a contented life. I moved into this house and gave birth to the heir, so you better be thankful. It's downright greedy to ask for more. That despite living together and being a homemaker, she acts like a pampered guest. My son's wife, Emily, didn't change even after they had a child. Amidst all this, my husband had a serious accident and passed away, but there's something off about my elder son's wife's behavior. She'll soon realize the consequences of doing things she can't face up to under the watchful eyes of the heavens. My name is Catherine, just an ordinary homemaker. I've been married for about 50 years and just recently said goodbye to my husband. Luckily, I can hardly eat. Sometimes, I still feel like he's gonna open that door and walk into the room, laughing. I loved my husband deeply, and we had just promised to live long and spend our lives together. But sadly, that promise was broken way too soon. And they ended up parting ways for reasons that, no matter how you looked at it, just couldn't be understood. Sometimes, I wonder if there was something I could have done. Although I'm head over heels for my husband now, I used to be a career woman. Back in my youth, I loved working and felt that, as a woman, I could live independently if I had a job. But either out of concern or impatience, people around me suggested I go on dates. On the arranged date, you casually have coffee and chat. I didn't want to decide my life based on such a vague series of events, so I turned down every single one of them. One day, my parents probably felt uneasy about my constant refusals. They tempted me with a lipstick shade no one in town had. Thinking it was just one meeting over coffee, I reluctantly agreed. Little did I know that lipstick lure date would turn my life upside down. The man I met was pleasant and jovial. He had a childlike face, just grown up, petty and sometimes saying more than needed, but he was endearing in his clumsiness. As we spoke, I got drawn in, and before I knew it, we were married. We had a son and a daughter. My daughter was quite charming, and it seemed she had close friends since she was little. She got married and left home at a pretty early age. On the other hand, my son, Kyle, though a man, was the exact opposite of my husband. My son, who has been working at the town hall since graduating from high school, appears rather plain at first glance. Since graduating from high school appears rather plain at first glance, with his most notable trait being his earnestness. He, as his parents, saw his good points, but society didn't seem to. Some people would say someone is too nice and thus boring. He was the very embodiment of that. Neither in his work nor personal life did he have any zest. He didn't seem to have many friends, male or female. Yet, despite reaching a certain age, he wasn't well versed in romantic relationships and seemed uninterested. Yet the marriage of one of his few friends from high school seemed to spark some desire in him. He often says he's not pretty or interesting enough for marriage, but it seems he harbors a hope of someday sharing his life with someone he truly loves and giving us peace of mind. He has even attended town-sponsored matchmaking events and local mixers. At first, I thought maybe it'd be good for him to experience matchmaking, just as I met my husband, but seeing that my son is paving his own path, we decided to just watch over him without interfering. One day, as spring was in the air, I noticed my son was acting a bit different than usual. Well, this is unusual for you, Kyle. What's up? Maybe it's the spring. I just feel so upbeat. I noticed him paying more attention to his clothing and even browsing through women's fashion catalogs. At first, he tried to brush it off, but being his mother, I knew something was up. Inquired, and it turned out he's seeing someone with intentions of marriage. He mentioned her birthday was coming up and that he wanted to propose to her on that day. My son looked overjoyed. She's such a vibrant person full of hobbies. Her smile always sparkles. She has so many qualities I lack and I just want to be with her. Thence apparently, they met when he was dining at a restaurant near his workplace. For years, my son had made it a routine to eat out at a restaurant every Wednesday and Thursday. During his lunch break, he'd always head to his usual spot and order his favorite meal. One day, a woman who happened to be nearby struck up a conversation with him, and to his surprise, they hit it off better than he'd ever imagined. I never realized the little everyday things could be this fun. If I just shuttled between work and home, I wouldn't have noticed. Oh, Kyle, I'm so happy you found someone who makes you feel this way. Will you introduce her to us? Is this Sunday okay? Because we were planning to go to a cafe, but I'll ask her. She's been wanting to meet you too. I'm sure she'll be okay with it. Seeing our once work-focused and relationship-free son so smitten made me curious about this woman. However, the promised day to meet her did not materialize. Mom, I'm sorry. She messaged me the other day saying she might have a meeting and might be late. But I haven't heard from her since. If she said she might be late, it means you weren't sure how things would turn out. There's no need for you, Kyle, to apologize for that. Besides, you can introduce her to us another time. At 3 other time, though I tried to assure my son. I had a sinking feeling. Since she's dating with the intention of marriage, she'd be seeing my husband and me as her future in-laws. For her to break a promise without communication seemed unusual. We eventually met her only after they married, basically after they were already husband and wife. This is Emily, the woman I've been talking about, and now my wife. Nice to meet you. Pleasure's mine. My son married a woman named Emily, just with a natural face devoid of makeup, wearing a sweatshirt and jeans. She spoke in a soft, muffled voice. I'd heard from my son that she was a vibrant woman with various hobbies, so the contrast to my expectations was striking. Even as she chatted with me and my son, she was intently peering into a planner she held, jotting something down. A quick glance revealed a schedule filled densely with colorful inks. Fan meetups, events, get-togethers, all terms I'd never heard before. What could they mean? She used to live with her family while working at a local supermarket, but decided to be a homemaker after getting married. Given that decision, I wondered why her schedule seemed to be bursting at the seams every day. Well, to me, it was a bit hard to comprehend. There I was, talking with my son and stealing glances at my watch, anxiously whispering, "I've got a live stream starting in 30 minutes. I gotta hurry. Oh, Emily, got some plans later. No, it's nothing." Maybe she wanted us to guess that she needed to wrap up early, but she replied sulkily. Clearly, she was irritated. With the sour mood killing the conversation, we called it a day. My son, who never seemed particularly interested in relationships, has finally tied the knot and looks genuinely happy. However, I couldn't help but notice his wife's restless demeanor, the way she spoke, her attire. Something felt off. Upon hearing of their marriage, we were almost immediately approached with the idea of living together. My son and his wife wanted to save as much money as possible for their future. Just when they approached us for any possible assistance, they eventually asked if they could move in with us. We were okay with it, but I was concerned if Emily, being in an unfamiliar home and transitioning to a full-time homemaker role, might feel overwhelmed. However, they assured us that there'd be no issues, and the decision was quickly made. Once the decision to live together was made, their actions were swift. Just 3 days after the decision, Emily had already moved out of her previous residence and completed the move. At slight unease I felt when I first met my son's wife grew over time, and its origins soon became apparent. It didn't seem like my son's wife truly settled into married life. She always had her planner filled to the brim with pictures of male pop stars and was constantly on her phone. It's my son's wife's right to have such belongings, but constantly being on her phone even when conversing with me, my husband, or my son is concerning. One day, we decided to set ground rules to ensure everyone in the household felt comfortable. And the first to speak up was her. Although both our couples live in the same house, we should respect that we're two separate families and refrain from interfering in each other's private matters. Right, privacy. Let's be mindful of each other's boundaries and maintain a healthy distance. However, she hides behind this rule, claiming to be a homemaker, yet hardly does anything around the house. She's always glued to her phone while I handle cooking and cleaning. She has my husband do the heavy lifting and cleaning the bathroom. But you see, I have a delicate back, and even little things can hurt it easily. That making a man over 70 do the heavy lifting and not even helping. Emily, that's a bit much. I wish you'd chip in sometimes. So you're saying it's okay for me to hurt my back? That's all you think? That's cruel. Didn't we promise not to nag each other about household chores? Have you forgotten? She shouts in a tone you wouldn't expect from her usual muffled voice. When you think you've no clue what she's upset about, she suddenly starts yelling. This is how it always goes, preventing any real communication, and time just keeps passing. Eventually, my son's wife began to shut herself in the shed outside. I saw the light of the TV and heard her shouting someone's name. Probably some male pop star from the photos she always carries around. The shed seems like it's become Emily's personal room. There was no consideration or effort to live harmoniously with those in the house. She only seemed to think about how to live comfortably for herself, which is rather vexing for us. However, my son didn't seem to be able to stand up to his wife, always remaining non-committal. Emily is struggling too in this unfamiliar environment. I'll help with the housework after work. But she just locks herself in the shed during the day. I hear her shouting sometimes, and it worries me. I'll talk to her. It's gonna be okay. We were not sure what happened, but my son's wife got pregnant. There were complications like severe morning sickness and preterm labor threats during her pregnancy, mostly spent in the hospital. But I remember feeling relieved once she safely gave birth. Till now, even though she called herself a homemaker without doing anything, life was okay because my son, my husband, and I pitched in. But now there's a child to care for, and she needs to act like a mother. There might be many adults in this house, but there's no substitute for a mother. Just because she came into this family doesn't mean she can act like a guest forever, expecting everything handed to her on a silver platter. She should realize that those days are over. However, my feelings don't seem to reach her, and life continues as usual after childbirth. In fact, it feels even worse. She leaves my grandchild with my son or US and seems to go out. Just around the time the grandchild turned 1, she disappeared overnight and only returned in the morning, which prompted a scolding from me. Going out all night without a word, especially with a child at home. What are you thinking? Be responsible. Plan. You're telling me what to do. I married into this family and even gave you an heir. I get that you're grateful, but you're a bit too demanding. Cecin, while she's bold enough to say things like that, she also relies on us in some ways. I can't go on trips because it's too rural here. I want to use my taxi fare for merch, so can you drive me? It's quite a self-centered request, but there's no point in arguing about it now, so I just did as she asked. As my son's wife freely does as she pleases. I can't quite figure out what my son saw in her to marry her in the first place, And the time I felt stressed and distrusted by my son's wife, an unexpected incident occurred. One day, I asked my husband to watch over the house because I had a neighborhood meeting. My son's wife seemed to be in the guest house as usual, so I just called out to her from outside and left. When I came back from the meeting, I found my husband collapsed at the bottom of the stairs. He appeared to be in pain and unable to move at the bottom of the stairs. As I panicked from the sudden event, my son's wife emerged from the next room. "Pen! Hang in there. Oh no! How could this happen while I'm here? I've already called 911, so just hang on." My son's wife seemed startled, but she was more proactive than I was. "Hey, the ambulance is here. I'll go with you. Catherine, please wait here at home." She acted so differently from my son's wife, who would either lock herself in the room or speak harshly to us. I thought my husband would recover and be discharged from the hospital soon, but contrary to my thoughts, his hospital stay got extended. The thing is, my husband wasn't used to hospital life, and it was evident that he was becoming both mentally and physically weaker because of it. When I visited him, my husband looked much frailer than I'd ever seen him before. Beside him sat my son's wife and my grandchild, already visited. I was worried about him. Seeing him get weaker every day is unbearable. Well, I was concerned about seeing my husband looking as if he'd seen something terrifying. There was something unsettling about her actions. Her actions throughout all of this. The usually reclusive, she had come out from the next room at that crucial moment. It's as if she knew what was happening with my husband. Furthermore, she seemed surprisingly efficient in arranging for the ambulance and the hospital procedures. My husband seemed like he wanted to go home, yet also showed signs of reluctance. Soon after, he became unable to eat and passed away all too quickly. Between my husband's injury and his sudden passing, I had a lot on my plate. Yet the shock was too much for me, and my body wouldn't cooperate as usual. "Catherine, please don't get too down. My husband and I will handle the funeral. Yes, I'm not feeling well, so can I leave it to you?" Ever since my husband got injured, she had been surprisingly supportive. It's hard to believe she's the same person who used to keep such a distance from the family. She promptly made decisions and plans with the funeral director. I've spent a lot of time at home, unlike my husband who worked outside, so I've always been taken care of by my father-in-law. Please let me return the favor now. While saying this, her eyes filled with tears. However, next to her, my grandchild, Henry, seemed restless and suddenly ran off somewhere. He dashed away so fast that it looked like he was fleeing from something, and I lost sight of him. On the day of the funeral, my son and his wife attended with their child, Henry. My husband had always lived with my grandchild since he was born, and adored him like the apple of his eye. Consequently, my grandchild loved my husband very much. So being 5 years old, he probably understood what the funeral meant and that he wouldn't see his beloved grandfather anymore. He seemed different, more restless than usual. However, perhaps Emily probably thought that scolding him as usual would draw too much attention in the crowd. Emily noticed his behavior and gently hugged him from behind. "Come on. Henry, say your final goodbye to Grandpa. It's not the last. Don't touch me. I'm scared. Stay away." Henry, who's usually calm and rarely makes a fuss, started to act out in an unprecedented manner. The folks around felt that this wasn't just some ordinary tantrum and began to murmur amongst themselves. Then, with a voice loud enough to drown out the commotion, Henry shouted, "Grandpa says Mom pushed him." The 5-year-old, my grandchild, clearly stated what he'd heard. The surrounding crowd was taken aback and speculations began to fly. Being this, my son's wife held my grandchild close, bowed her head for a moment, then looked up and clearly stated, "Oh, lately, he's been influenced by cartoons. And says things like this. I apologize for my poor parenting. I'll talk to him properly later." When my son's wife said that, the commotion seemed to die down as if those around were convinced by her explanation. But then, Henry suddenly ran out of the funeral home. A few people concerned tried to chase after him but lost sight and soon returned. Despite the disruptions, the funeral had to continue. The rituals and prayers proceeded, and all that remained was to seal the casket. Just before the casket was to be sealed, attendees began to place flowers inside the casket and say their final goodbyes. Just then, Henry came running with a pair of scissors in his hand. Henry stopped the person who was about to nail the casket shut, trying to retrieve a fanny pack that the deceased had been wearing inside the casket. "Dad, get Grandpa's fanny pack. He always wore—" Henry screamed, frantically trying to cut the belt of the fanny pack with the scissors. However, interrupting those words, my son's wife spoke gently to him. "You see, this fanny pack was something Grandpa always wore and cherished. He probably wants to take it with him to heaven." Mama's lying. "Don't come near. He never said that." "Dad, help me quickly." My son, sensing that his usually calm son must have a reason for behaving this way, rushed over to the coffin alongside him and helped remove the fanny pack. While my son's wife had only stood by watching the two, as soon as the fanny pack was removed, she reached for the fanny pack. "Stop. Don't touch it." My son's wife, seemingly having anticipated this, tried to snatch the fanny pack, but her actions seemed very unnatural. Perhaps my son had his suspicions based on her previous behavior, as he quickly brushed his wife's hand away and handed the fanny pack to his son. Henry, what's in this fanny pack? Why do you insist on this?" "Grandpa told me to help and to check it." Beside Henry, who was now emptying the contents of the fanny pack, my son's wife yelled at him. "Stop it. You're probably making Grandpa sad. Do you want to ruin the funeral? Grandpa told me to do this." Ignoring her protests, Henry proceeded to methodically check every compartment. The last pocket he reached for was a hidden one deep inside. I wasn't even aware such a pocket existed, but inside it was a slightly oversized pen. Holding that pen, my grandchild ran over to a person by the side of the funeral room who had a computer set up. Open the cap of this and put it in that machine. I was clueless about this device. I'd never known my husband to own such a pen, so it was impossible that my grandchild knew about it. Furthermore, my son and his wife rarely use computers at home, so Henry probably didn't know how to use one either. Yet, with his assertive actions and unwavering statements, I couldn't help but believe in some mysterious force at play. What appeared to be a pen was actually a voice recorder. The recording clearly captured the sound of an argument between my husband and my son's wife. The old geezer, just kick the bucket already. Leave some money behind and get lost. Gilk. Once you're gone, he'll be the head of the house. But you're just in the way. The voice was unmistakably my son's wife's, hurling hurtful words with unimaginable venom. There was also the distinct sound of something or someone falling. Emily, what kind of person are you? Why would you do this? It wasn't me, and I've told you I don't know. I was there when he got hurt. He was hospitalized, and even during the funeral. You saw all of it, didn't you? And you still say it's me? It's so sad that Henry has to see his mom being blamed like this. She continued to play the part of the dutiful wife who had lovingly cared for her father-in-law. Her theatrical tone was irksome. As I was pondering how to address the situation, suddenly Henry spoke up. I know what you did. You spread oil on the stairs while I was at daycare, and you talked about getting rid of the old man. Stop making up crazy stories. If you don't cut it out, you're gonna get in big trouble, you hear? At first, my son's wife feigned innocence, using her son as an alibi. But one statement from her child changed everything. Grandpa told me to run because I'm next. Mom, stay away from me. Saying that, he picked up a paper and pen nearby and began to write something down. Henry was just 5 years old. He rarely wrote anything, but he smoothly continued writing. I set this polite anterior when I peeked at the paper. Both I and my son and his wife were shocked. Participation in handwriting identical to my husband's. It read, if anything happens to Henry, I'll hunt. Be prepared. Stop it, please stop. I had no other choice. Feeling cornered and rejected even by her child, my son's wife eventually confessed everything. Why would you do something like this? What did you want so badly that you'd harm someone? I wanted to support Sean. He meant everything to me. Except here, I was momentarily taken aback by the name, but then I remembered hearing it often on TV. He was a popular singer who was always on the talk shows. From her story, it became clear that this all started because she wanted to spend more money on her favorite idol. It's for Sean. I'll do anything. I realized I have a limit on how much money I can earn. So, I thought, why not marry someone rich? So you approached me and said you wanted to marry, not because you loved me, but for this Sean guy? Of course. Who would fall head over heels for a plain and boring guy like you? She initially married my son because she was after his money. He had a stable job and probably had a lot of disposable income. She set her sights on him and pursued him aggressively. And my son's wife wasn't satisfied with just my son's earnings. She wanted more, a substantial amount of money. She thought that the quickest way to get it was through life insurance. I want to be recognized, but just relying on your earnings isn't enough. To get closer to Sean, I need more money. So you wanted not only my earnings, but also life insurance money. All for this, Sean? To meet him, I need money. Every handshake, every photo opportunity, they all cost money. He has so many fans, and I can't lose, you understand? She needed my son for the regular household expenses, and it seemed she believed that my husband would have a larger life insurance payout. If something happened to my husband, and the life insurance money came through, it would be split between some. However, most of it would stay in the house. That meant my son's wife could spend it as she pleased. I probably won't be around for long, and eventually her husband, my son, will take care of the household. That means she'll have free reign over the household finances. I remember her saying that she was planning to spend as much money as she wanted on her favorite pop star. After that incident, my son came to his senses and immediately took steps to divorce her. I loved you when we got married, especially when you were doing what you loved and shining. But I was blind to everything else. I can't believe you'd even think about harming someone, especially for money. We can't live together, especially not for our son's sake. Hold on. I know I'm obsessed with my idol, but you love that about me, right? We got married because you loved me. How can you just divorce me like that? It's astounding that even after all this, my son's wife still firmly believed that my son loved her. She must have some nerves. I believe what Henry is saying and what he sees about my dad. It's terrifying just to think that after my father, you might see our son as a threat. This isn't just a passing whim. I've left everything to you until now, but I'm gonna turn things around and properly raise Henry from now on. Obviously, I'll live with Henry. I can't believe how oblivious she is, still insisting she'll have rights to live with Henry. She's really lost it. If you divorce me, where will I live? Well, as long as I have Henry, I'll get child support from you. So, I guess I can let you divorce me? But you might struggle to make ends meet. So, you're basically just seeing our child as a cash cow. It's heartbreaking to think of him growing up with you. I can't hand over our child to someone who'd harm others for their own selfish reasons. Soon after, the police contacted us, saying they would investigate, including our home. As apparently, a distant relative attending the funeral was a cop and had set things in motion. Upon thorough investigation, there were several injuries and dents that couldn't have resulted from a simple fall. Just along with the audio evidence being accepted, it became almost certain that my son's wife had pushed him. I didn't need my son to intervene. She was taken to the police station that very day. She probably won't breathe fresh air for quite some time, but that's the bed she made. My son promptly made my son's wife agree to the divorce, making him officially single. Now, my son lives with Henry, raising him. While I can't bring back my beloved husband, I find happiness in living surrounded by my son and my adorable grandchild. Sense of the pain of loss and cherished moments can never return, but looking forward to my grandchild's growth brings joy. After that incident, my grandchild's mysterious power seems to have waned, and he's been talking less about my husband. Rather than dwelling on the past, I want to focus on the happiness that lies ahead. During the time we dated, Michael was so kind. However, after marriage, he became a completely different person. He brags about working at a top-tier company, and he lords it over me and our children every single day. I wanted to continue working after we got married, but Michael and my father-in-law ordered me to quit. I reluctantly became a stay-at-home mom. At one evening, Michael looked at me and laughed. "You've aged, haven't you? You looked better when we first got married. Probably because you're just lounging around as a housewife. Using the kids as an excuse to be lazy, it's no wonder you're going downhill as a person. I can't take it anymore. Let's get a divorce." Without hesitation, I shouted. Michael responded with a smirk. "You can raise the 4 kids by yourself. I ain't gonna help at all from now on." I almost laughed. Has he ever really helped before? I'll be relieved when you noisy folks are gone. I think I'll go to the attorney's office. You can have your say for now. Get wistra different you ate while you can. My name is Sarah, a 50-year-old housewife. Introduced by our parents, I met Michael and we've been married for 30 years. Michael's verbal abuse has grown worse every year, and it troubles me. When we dated, he wasn't like this. After graduating from college, Michael often talked about his job at a top-tier company during our dates. I didn't understand all the technical jargon, but I felt he was serious and passionate about his work. Having lost my dad at a young age and witnessing my mom's struggles, I wanted to marry Michael and provide a sense of security for my mom. A significant point was that he didn't have a mother. Michael told me that his parents divorced when he was a teenager and he was raised by his father. Not having a real dad, I was excited to have a father figure in my life, even if we weren't related by blood. I had high hopes, but those hopes were shattered shortly after our wedding. I found out that Michael was completely controlled by his father. Many of Michael's relatives owned businesses or restaurants, and his father was an entrepreneur. Michael truly respected his father. I got into a prestigious university and a top-tier company because I always listened to my dad. He would often say with pride, "After divorcing my mom, my dad raised me while growing his business." He's an incredible person. Yes, he seems like it. When we have a son, I'm gonna make sure he gets a proper education and follows in my footsteps. I worked in my dad's company for a while, but had to change jobs due to an injury. So if we have a son, I want him to be the successor. But don't get ahead of yourself. I'm not even pregnant yet. Before we had children, I could listen to this and just laugh it off. But as I gave birth to daughters one after the other, Michael and his father became increasingly cold toward me. When our third daughter was born, my father-in-law visited the hospital room, gave a disdainful look at the sleeping baby, and clicked his tongue. "Another girl, huh? Mike, you sure picked a dude of a wife." "I'm sorry. Oh, Dad. Sarah, if the next one is a girl, we're getting a divorce. We don't need a wife who can't produce an heir." After a difficult delivery and having had a C-section, actually system, I was devastated by their words and couldn't stop crying. I considered divorce at that very moment. But then, when our son, Tom, was born, my father-in-law adored him. He'd take Michael and Tom out to animated movies, buy Tom toys, and give him allowance, leaving out the daughters. This puzzled Tom and upset the girls. Every time I slightly burned dinner or left a speck of dust after cleaning, Michael would exaggerate his frustration. "If this was a job, you'd be fired by now. Must be nice to be a woman, getting taken care of. I wish I could just laze around and play with the kids all day." Every time he said this, it really ticked me off. I wanted to keep working, but just after we got married, I was ordered by Michael and my father-in-law. "You can do a wife's job perfectly, right? If you're gonna slack off, quit that desk job. Yeah, if you can't do household chores and take care of me properly, you're not fit to be a wife. You can live on my salary alone, so you don't need to work." I was taken aback, wondering what era these guys were living in. But I didn't want any trouble with my husband and father-in-law, so early in our marriage, so I obeyed. Later, when Tom started elementary school, I tried to re-enter the workforce as a full-time employee. Digs? I was turned down everywhere I applied. If you have 4 kids, it seems you might take off frequently, like if one of them gets sick. That was pretty much the reason everywhere. Left with no other option, I became a stay-at-home mom. Michael treated me like a servant, always finding fault and criticizing me as an incompetent housewife. Michael, citing his busy work schedule, dumped all household chores and child-rearing on me. Being a stay-at-home mom, I didn't mind taking on household duties. But even when I was under the weather or sleep-deprived after childbirth, he never once showed compassion or empathy. Actions. Lately, I've been losing sleep because the baby cries at night. "You've tomorrow off, right, Michael? Could you watch him for just one night?" "Phil, tomorrow's my day off, you know? Don't ruin my precious day. Taking care of a baby is a mother's job, isn't it? Just do it." Back when I was struggling with only about 2 hours of sleep a night, I asked Michael, who's laughing out loud while watching a movie with a beer in his hand, and that's how he yelled back at me. Occasion on another day, he told me, "You want to talk about the kids? At your age and decide on your own. You've already raised 3, haven't you? Don't rely on others." And if he ever came home to find the kids' toys scattered about, he'd immediately turn grumpy. For you, when I come home tired and the house is a mess, it makes me not want to come home at all. "You're at home all day, right? Shouldn't it be clean?" "I'm sorry." Tom was fussy, and preparing dinner was challenging. "I'll clean up now." As I started picking up the toys, Michael's sarcastic remarks rained down on me. The reason Tom is so spoiled is because you're not firm enough with him. You really are a failure, but you're not fit to be a mother. Spoiled. I wondered. Emma's only 5, of course, he's going to be assertive. But such comments felt like a stab to the heart. Hey, don't make that sulky face. It's ruining my appetite. It's annoying. But to another room with the kid. Sarah, our 8th grader, who'd been watching, glared at Michael. Dad, how can you say that when you're eating the meal Mom made? You're a girl and you're talking back to your father. If you've got a problem, just leave. Natalie, don't talk to your dad like that. Let's go upstairs. I soothed Natalie and took the younger kids upstairs with me. Once we closed the door to our room, Sarah vented her frustration. Why don't you stand up for yourself? Isn't it hard hearing him say those things? Why not just get a divorce? Actually, I'd love to, but leaving with 4 kids would take a lot of courage. Once I'm in high school, I can earn money from a part-time job. Would that still not be enough? I gave Natalie a weak smile. Thank you. Appreciate the thought. I gently stroked Sarah's head and she became quiet, her mouth turning downward. It seems Natalie, at her young age, feels that the relationship between her parents is beyond repair. So, on days when I had no plans for myself, actively took care of the younger kids. Michael is a father too, after all. I say I wish he'd spend time with his children, but he always treats them as a nuisance and complains they're the source of his stress. Whenever he hears the children's voices on the weekends, he grumbles, I have a headache. I feel nauseous, and orders me, take them somewhere. Despite his clear dislike for kids, when we visit his parents' home, he pretends to adore Tom just to show his father that he values the family heir. One weekend, as usual, and Michael woke up in the afternoon and blurted out to me as I was having lunch with the kids. Can't you see I'm exhausted? Take the kids out somewhere. I'm going to go out for drinks with a colleague in the Evict, so you can come back by then. I get it. By the way, our living expenses have been decreasing over the past year. Can we get back to the original amount? I asked hesitantly, and Michael's eyes widened in anger. $300 for groceries and living expenses should be enough. You're a housewife, manage the budget better. Can't you even do that without a high school degree? $300 is nowhere near enough. You've been working overtime and on weekends a lot lately, so your salary must have increased. Why are you reducing our living expenses? When I voiced my concerns, Michael became infuriated. Enough! How I use my salary is my business. How dare you argue with me? Who do you think provides for this family? Realizing I couldn't reason with Michael anymore, I gave up. I couldn't rely on him any longer. While the kids were at school, I studied, got a certification, and secretly started working from home. After some time, one evening, Michael came home reeking of alcohol and laughed when he saw me. Geez, Sarah, I thought you were some old lady at first. Hey, you drink too much. Leave me be. But seriously, you've aged. You looked better when we got married. I felt my blood boil due to the budget cuts. I had switched to cheaper cosmetics, and I hadn't bought new clothes for the past year. On the other hand, he frequently gets new suits and ties, goes out drinking every night to treat his subordinates, and buys branded shoes and watches. Clutching my fists and shaking with anger, I retorted, I'd love to dress up too, but you won't give me the money. Michael, don't blame others. Maybe you're just aging fast because you're just lazing around as a stay-at-home mom. Michael mocked loudly. You always seem to be relaxing, lacking any urgency. You use the kids as an excuse to be lazy. No wonder you're falling apart. My anger was so intense that I felt dizzy. Who was it that insisted I become a stay-at-home mom when I wanted to continue working? That's it. Let's get a divorce. I blurted out. Michael looked shocked for a second, but then smirked. Fine by me. I'm honestly tired of seeing your gloomy face. He casually added, but you're gonna raise those 4 kids on your own. Don't expect any help from me. I almost laughed. Has he ever really helped? Weren't those kids always my responsibility? Just thinking of a life without those noisy brats makes me feel relieved. Feeling it was all absurd, I headed for the front door without replying. I think I'll go to the attorney's office. Turning my back to Michael, I smiled defiantly. Enjoy your freedom while you can. Make the most of it. Sure about this? Don't come regretting later. Think you can handle 4 kids on your own? You've always relied on me. As I urged the kids and started packing our things to move, he kept taunting in a mocking tone. Your mother's working, but it's gonna be hard for an old lady to support all 5 of you. Gonna end up broke, all of you. And who's gonna hire you with kids as an excuse? Actually, I started working from home. I have savings from before we were married, and if we're not extravagant, we can manage. If you started a job, why didn't you tell me? Sarah, I always said I was too tired or it was too loud with the kids. You never really listened to me. Well, whatever. You're probably making less than me anyway. Don't come crying to me for help. As Michael spat out those sarcastic remarks, I silently packed my things into cardboard boxes. The movers will come to pick up the boxes in 3 days. But just leave them as they are. And don't forget the divorce papers. Got it. Do whatever you want. After calling the movers, I grabbed only my valuables and some clothes and drove to my parents' house. For now, I plan to stay at my parents' place and look for a new house once things settle down. I had briefly explained to the kids that we were getting a divorce, but elaborated on the situation during the drive. I'm sorry it's so sudden, but you'll be transferring to a new elementary school next week. I'm really sorry. Dad, we love Grandma. Can't wait. It's not that far with the bus. We can still hang out with our friends. It's okay. Trying to cheer me up, My kids acted more excited than they probably felt, nearly bringing tears to my eyes. "You won't be living with Dad anymore. Aren't you going to miss him?" "Not really. I mean, Dad seems to dislike us, right?" Tom chimed in. "He always yells at us when he's home on weekends. Says we're loud and annoying. He never plays with us or listens to us. We didn't like being with him." "Yeah, we all felt that way, Mom." Nodding in agreement, my kids made me feel even more guilty. I should have made the decision to divorce earlier, but went when I called and explained the situation to my mom. She was shocked and saddened. Whenever Michael visited my parents' house during holidays, he acted like a good husband and father. So my mother believed we were happily married, making this news even more heartbreaking for her. Once the kids were asleep at my parents' place, my mother spoke to me. "Sarah, you can stay here as long as you want. We can help with living expenses." "Thank you, but I'll be okay. Can you recommend a good lawyer?" "Of course. I'll arrange an appointment. Let me know if you need any other help." "Thanks, Mom." Her reassuring words warmed my heart. 6 months after the divorce, as the kids and I were starting to adjust to our new lives, I returned home from shopping to find Michael waiting outside the gate. His hair, now streaked with gray, was unkempt and dark circles marred his eyes. He lunged at me as soon as he saw me, but I brushed him off coldly. "Who are you? Come on, don't do that. It's me, your husband." "I don't have a husband." "What do you want, ex-husband?" Pushing him away, I asked. Michael, nearly hysterical, started shouting. "They kicked me out of the house?" "What the hell? It wasn't out of the blue. You should have received multiple notices about the rent. It's only natural they'd evict you. Natural they'd evict you if you ignored them. Why should I pay? You were living there." Hearing the commotion, a middle-aged neighbor peeked out her door. "Sarah, is everything okay? Should I call the cops?" "No, it's okay. It's just my ex-husband." The woman gave Michael a sharp look and furrowed her brows. That guy. "Sarah, if anything happens, let me know," she said, then disappeared into the house. "What's she been saying about me?" "Oh, come on in. We're causing a scene." Ignoring his question, I ushered Michael inside. As soon as we got into the living room, Michael slouched on the couch, gulping down the tea I'd served, then returned to the topic. "That house, it was bought by your mom, right?" "Yes, but it's under your name." "Michael, because you said it'd be embarrassing if it was under your wife's name." Michael tilted his head as if unsure. "Was that so? But at the time, you, being just a regular employee, couldn't afford the mortgage payments. So my mom had to transfer money into your account every month." "Ah, right. But if she suddenly stops, we're gonna be in a fix, aren't we?" "Are you smart enough to understand that?" I held my forehead, sighing. "Who's the dumb one here? Listen, in what world would a mom continue to pay her divorced daughter's ex-husband's mortgage?" Michael frowned. "That'ly your mom's loaded, isn't she? If she's got the money, she can pay up. Isn't it family's duty to help each other out in times of need?" Who was it that pushed me away, telling me not to rely on others when I needed advice on childcare? And by the way, aren't you a manager at a big company? Why are you so short on cash? Rest. Michael stumbled over his words. Well, I'd been treating my subordinates. Testing their morale is an important responsibility of a superior. Oh, you cut down on our household expenses for that. And didn't the period when our living costs decreased coincide with your increased overtime and weekend work? Michael looked a bit uneasy at my pointing it out. This work got busier, and I had to establish a strong rapport with them to keep their motivation up. Oh, interesting. You're cold to your own family, but warm to your subordinates. They're more endearing than you guys, Really? Anyway, I have a suggestion. If you got kicked out of your home, how about staying at a motel? I've got some vouchers for a hotel run by my mom's friend. Bakel's eyes widened. Really? You'd give them to me? I have a bunch, so I can share a few. Generous of you. I'll get things sorted by this weekend, so that'll be good. All right then. Dictating the motel vouchers with a gleeful grin. Michael left in high spirits. Spirits all right, all is set that weekend night while the kids and I were watching animal videos. In the living room, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Michael and my father-in-law. To my astonishment, they barged into the living room without a word, seeing the kids engrossed in the TV. Tom shouted angrily, "You're wasting time with this nonsense. This is why y'all remain immature." His thunderous voice shattered our peaceful weekend mood, and the kids teared up, disturbing our family time. Tom now directed his anger at Michael. Michael, are you really gonna leave Tom with this woman? What about the plan for Ari? I want her here to raise all 4 kids and let her experience hardship. I'll make sure she realizes how much she's taken my earnings for granted, Michael stated defiantly. If you want an heir so badly, then find yourself a younger and more submissive wife and have another child, fine. Then just find your next wife, quickly listening to their conversation. I felt sick to my stomach. They still saw a wife as nothing more than a tool to produce children. What do you two want here? With a malicious grin, Michael said. We're here to claim damages. What you've neglected your duties as a wife, always prioritizing the kids. Because of you and the children, I couldn't get proper rest on weekends, feeling all stressed out. So I'm demanding $10,000 as compensation? I agree with what Michael's saying. Isn't it natural for a wife to prioritize her husband over her children, neglecting to care for your husband? She clearly lacks a sense of responsibility. As a wife, it took me a while to understand what Michael was saying. I thought he was joking, but seeing his intimidating father-in-law accompanying him, it seems he was serious. I felt a headache coming on. I wanted to pat myself on the back for enduring so many years with such a person. As I was contemplating how to respond, my mother appeared at the open living room door. Well, what a commotion," she said in a calm tone. Behind her stood a man in a suit. As expected, my mother had brought a lawyer with her mom. Relieved, I glanced at my father-in-law, who was now pale and shaking. He seemed completely different from the aggressive person he was earlier. Hello, Dad explained the situation to her dad. Michael looked equally shocked at the sudden change in his father's demeanor. With the support of my allies, I regained my composure and went to the bedroom to retrieve a large envelope. I asked Natalie to take the kids upstairs, and once only the adults remained, I spread out the contents of the envelope on the living room table. It took a while to get the lawyer's schedule. Mom, sorry to keep you waiting. My husband just arrived. Would it be okay to discuss alimony, property division, and child support here and now? What? Looking puzzled, I explained to Michael. The private investigator said it was easy to track you since you checked into the hotel I recommended. Look, since you were being affectionate in the parking lot, so he got a lot of two-shot pictures. As I spread out the photos proving his infidelity, Michael was lost for words. After regaining his senses, he began to shout, "You set me up by having me stay at that hotel. That's low. I don't think someone who's been cheating for over a year should be saying that." I also placed our joint bank account book on the table. "I can't believe you gave more than $10,000 to that woman. And here you were being stingy with the household money, telling me to respect you because you're a manager at a big company, but you're the worst as both a husband and a father. What's wrong with spending my own salary on myself?" "Right, Dad?" After a long silence, my father-in-law muttered, "So it was Michael who was cheating, not Sarah." "Yes, that's right. This woman is making a big deal out of a simple affair. She's truly insufferable." With a smirk, Michael was met with a sharp glare from his father. "You big liar," which my startled self inquired. What exactly did you hear?" With a bitter expression, he explained, "Sarah was cheating, neglecting the kids and housework, and throwing everything on to me. On top of that, she ran away from home saying she was gonna take the kids and divorce. Honey or so. What? That's all a lie. If you want, I have audio evidence of Michael being affectionate with his mistress and him verbally abusing me and the kids. Would you like to hear it?" "No need." As like his mother, what a hopeless guy. Utterings of frustration leaked from my father-in-law's mouth. And then, after a moment of apparent hesitation, he apologized to both my mother and me. "Sarah, I'm truly sorry for believing my foolish son without checking the facts. I hope you can forgive me. The new CEO, thanks to her they managed to recover. If she pulls out her investment now, even our group companies will be hit hard." Realizing the gravity of the situation from his father's words, Michael's previously arrogant face turned pale, and he knelt beside his father. I'm so sorry. It's okay. I wouldn't ruin Michael's uncle's company over something like this. But, Michael, you'll have to take responsibility." With an angelic smile, my mother revealed, "I heard the woman you cheated with is your subordinate. I know the CEO of your company, so I've informed him about this. Starting next week, you'll be transferred to a remote island. It's a shame, especially after you worked so hard to become a manager. Well, do your best at work, all right? When Michael looked up, he sniffled and started crying like a little boy. He had it coming. I felt refreshed as I looked down at him. Later, with a lawyer present, we proceeded with the divorce process. Completely dejected, Michael agreed to pay back in full the amount I proposed, as well as the savings from our joint account that he had misused. My mom, true to her word, informed Michael's boss about the affair through a mutual friend. His boss, known for being a dedicated family man, was furious. Michael's mistress resigned voluntarily, and Michael was transferred to a remote branch in Alaska. When the mistress found out Michael was no longer on the fast track, she dumped him quickly. Michael tried to bounce back at the branch, but due to the reason for his transfer, he became the subject of gossip and eventually couldn't stand it, so he quit the company. Michael had accumulated a massive debt from paying me back, and with monthly child support payments, he's been working multiple part-time jobs from morning till night. Since his father-in-law disowned him, he couldn't rely on anyone and is said to live alone in a dimly lit apartment. Atan, on the other hand, his father became unpopular among relatives after angering my mom, who's a CEO. Additionally, because of his abusive behavior, his subordinates rebelled, eventually causing his company to go under. Now, he works as a waiter in a restaurant, often being scolded by the younger manager. While Michael was having his affair, I bumped money from my remote job and used it as a down payment to buy a second-hand house, moving in with my kids. Although my mom, who had cut off financial support to Michael, offered to buy back the house for us, I didn't want to return because of the unpleasant memories. Succession, now that the kids are no longer connected to Michael and their grandfather, they look noticeably happier and more relaxed. Every long weekend, we visit my mom's house, helping her out cooking meals together and chatting. Together, chatting has become our recent pleasure. Now, I'm focusing on my remote work, but once Tom grows up a bit, I'm going to look for a full-time job again. From now on, I want to live happily with my 4 children, occasionally relying on my mom for support. How it hurts! Help me? I can only whimper softly as I protect my aching back and legs. The moment I arrived at my apartment's parking lot, the car that had been parked in front of me suddenly sped towards me at a furious pace. Before I could dodge, the car hit me and a loud thud echoed throughout the parking lot. I hit the asphalt hard with my back and butt, and as I was enduring that pain, I squinted due to the pain in my thigh. Perhaps I got a cut from the fall. Blood was steadily oozing from my thigh. Everything went white before my eyes, but I heard the car door open. Out from the passenger side stepped my husband. "Oh, it's you," I called out to my husband with a trembling voice, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Walking to the front of the car, my husband's gaze was fixed solely on the front bumper that had hit me. My husband carefully examined the car from every angle, not responding at all, no matter how much I called out to him. When he finally seemed to snap out of it, he looked to the driver's seat with a gentle smile and said, "There's no damage to the car." "Are you okay, Mom?" That was a shock, wasn't it? It seemed that to Bob, his pale-faced mother-in-law in the driver's seat was more important than me, bleeding right in front of him. Rage surged from deep within me, and after that, my name is Catherine. I'm a 25-year-old office worker. I moved from a remote island in Hawaii to a university in New York and landed a job near the university right after. I started dating a salesman, it's Dave, who came to our company, and we just got married a month ago. Catherine, even if you're going to continue working, where should we live? Aki, maybe we should consider buying a house soon. Why don't we rent an apartment for now? We can look for a place and discuss what kind of house to build later. But I also want to live in our own house someday, so let's start saving up, I replied. Just talking about the future made us happy. Dave was an only child. His family consisted of just my mother-in-law. A few years ago, his father passed away, leaving Dave and my mother-in-law. Soon to be married, we had been looking at various rental properties. But one day, my mother-in-law suggested that we live with her. Well, I was hesitant about living together so soon after getting married. Dave quickly assured my mother-in-law that we wouldn't. Instead, he mentioned that he didn't want to leave my mother-in-law alone, so he suggested renting a place close to my in-laws' house. I thought it was better than living together, so I agreed. We decided to rent an apartment within walking distance from my in-laws' house in Nebraska. Catherine, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have both of you nearby. After your father-in-law passed away, it was just me and Dave. If Dave had left too, I would have been scared. So thank you truly. Thank you too. I'm glad to have you close by, mother-in-law. And this dinner is so delicious, thank you. It's no problem, darling. Cooking in big batches always tastes better, so don't mention it. Since we were in walking distance, my mother-in-law often checked on us. Both of us were working full-time, and when our busy periods overlapped, we'd get home late. Knowing this, she would bring over a home-cooked meal once a week. Honestly, we usually come home late during our busy times, so having my mother-in-law's cooked dinner was a lifesaver. My mother-in-law's a kind and wonderful person. I felt lucky to have found such a loving partner. As my own mother had always been delighted with my husband and mother-in-law, saying they were wonderful people since our marriage introduction. My husband and I continued to enjoy our married life, always getting along. Also on weekends, we often went for drives. My husband loves cars, and he drives a big right-hand drive vehicle. You really love cars, don't you? Dave? I've never met anyone who loved cars as much as you do. Really? My car's always clean, right? I think I gotta keep it clean, especially when I'm driving you around. Catherine, just like my husband says, riding in a clean car does feel good. I loved these moments with my husband. I believed that this happiness would last forever. However, I started feeling that our days might be disrupted about a month after our marriage. Mom, stop it. I'm not a kid. I can eat on my own. But look, what if you hurt your hand? But you work on the computer, so it's a no-no. I can manage. Catherine's here too. It's okay. I've always helped you like this, right? Let me do it for you. That day, my mother-in-law came to our place with crab. My mother-in-law carefully removed the crab meat and handed it to my husband. I watched this scene from the kitchen, finding it odd. My husband's the same age as me. He can eat crab on his own, and even if he works with computers, he's more of a salesperson who travels, so it's not a critical issue. Usual when he ate crab with me, he peeled it and ate by himself without getting hurt. Dave, look at this piece. It's loaded with meat. Here, open up. I can eat by myself. Just drop it, okay? My mother-in-law was snugly feeding him crab right next to my husband. Honestly, I thought he could eat it, even if she wasn't that close to him. Starting that day, I began to notice how close my husband was to my mother-in-law. After feeling that way, I started to be bothered by every little thing. Today, I'm gonna drop Mom off at her class. Weren't we gonna go to a movie this evening? I even bought the tickets. I'm sorry. The movie will probably be out on DVD soon, so we can watch it then. Since we already bought the tickets, just go see it by your site today. It might not be to the point where he's a mama's boy, but if for some reason, my husband always listens to what my mother-in-law says. After a little while ago, my mother-in-law suddenly called in the evening saying she wanted sushi. That day, we had planned to go out for a barbecue. We were just about to leave the house when she called. I thought maybe we'd all go to the sushi place together, but my husband just told me, sorry. Go have a dinner by yourself, and left to meet my mother-in-law. But when I confronted my husband, after he returned home, he just said he'd be careful next time. But he never changed. Whenever there was a clash between something I wanted and what my mother-in-law wanted, for some reason, he always prioritized my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law just took it for granted. In fact, my mother-in-law tried to stay close to my husband as much as possible. It seemed like it was my husband's idea, but my mother-in-law started delivering dinner to our place and often stayed to eat with us. That thing, this became a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly routine. Even if I kept refusing, thinking it would be too much of a burden on my mother-in-law, she just brushed it off with "I live close by, so it's okay." On top of that, she would invite us over to my in-laws' home for tea or meals during the weekends. Naturally, our alone time as a couple dwindled, and I couldn't find time to do house chores over the weekend. If I suggested my husband go alone, my mother-in-law would strongly request that I come along too. Whether she came to our place or we were called to my in-laws, it was always the same. My mother-in-law started criticizing me for not doing enough around the house. Answerin, I know you both work, but you need to prepare a decent dinner. Relying solely on takeout is just not how a housewife should be. Excuse me, when I get home late, it's been arranged for Dave to buy his favorite takeout. What on earth is that? Not only do you barely cook, but you're letting your husband do the grocery shopping for dinner. I can't believe it. Do you even realize how busy Dave is? You're his wife, His wife, you should be thinking about your family's nutrition and at least preparing meals. Upon hearing my words, my mother-in-law's eyes widened in surprise. The older woman crossed her arms, looking up at me, and began to speak in a firm tone. Honestly, I'm the one making most of your dinners, ain't I? I thought maybe once a week because of being busy, but now it's twice, sometimes even 3 times. Plus you eat at our place on weekends. You hardly ever have the chance to make dinner yourself. Everyone's busy, you can't just use that as an excuse all the time. I couldn't hide her sigh at my mother-in-law's words. Who did she think was to blame for the reduced time to prepare dinner? So the unsolicited meals, despite numerous refusals, were always pushed onto them by my mother-in-law. As I was about to retort, my husband stepped in front of me, and he gave me a stern look. That's right, Catherine. Mom's cooking is delicious, but you can't always take advantage of it. It's too much of a burden on her. And, only eating takeout ain't healthy. You gotta start making some homemade meals from time to time. Well said, Dave. After all, in a marriage, the husband really needs to keep his wife in line, doesn't he? But Dave, it's not that your mom doesn't like cooking. I know, Mom. Your home-cooked meals are my favorite. And then my mother-in-law and my husband seemed to create a world of just the two of them. They didn't notice that I was saying nothing, nor the cold stare I was giving them. Catherine's young, so I get it. Even if she had time, I doubt she could whip up a tasty meal. Probably some over-seasoned dish without giving much thought to nutrition. Exactly. Catherine loves barbecue, so there are a lot of meat dishes. Plus, she's a bit naive about some things. Meat isn't the be-all and end-all. You gotta think about veggies too. Catherine's not quite there yet in terms of nutrition. She doesn't have the experience as a housewife like you do. My husband stated, joining my mother-in-law in belittling me. I mean, at this point, it seems ridiculous to even argue. If I just keep quiet and wish they'd hurry up and leave, they'd just gang up and ridicule me for being rude. But if I ignore even that, eventually, my satisfied mother-in-law will head back to her in-law's house. As soon as my mother-in-law's gone, my husband starts playing games on his phone and I confront him. Hey, what's the deal? You have her bring over food she wasn't even asked to make, then get mad at me for not cooking. I can't cook because she always brings over so much food. And you two keep harping about cooking and cleaning, but don't you realize that with her coming over so often? I don't have the time. If you want me to do these things, stop inviting her. If you prefer her company, why don't you just go live with her? At my words, my husband glances at me and smirks. What's the matter? Jealous? We've always been close, People around town talk about how tight we are. Besides, if you learned from my mom, you'd get better at these things, right? Instead of telling her not to come, why don't you learn a thing or two? Excuse me? Taken aback by his nonsensical response, I was left speechless. Maybe he wasn't expecting a reply, because my husband's attention shifted back to his phone game. I could feel the weight in my heart. Dave was no longer the man I had once fallen in love with. After that, I began to stand up to my mother-in-law, even if it meant being disliked by her. Still, she'd often barge in saying, "I'm here to teach you." Finally, at my wit's end. Actually, I didn't let my mother-in-law into the house when she arrived and told her bluntly that she was being a nuisance. My mother-in-law looked stunned, but then shouted back in anger. After pushing her out the front door and closing it firmly, the next thing I knew, my husband came home and together they stormed into the living room, shouting and making a scene. That seemed to be the last straw. My mother-in-law even started interfering in my work. "Catherine, can't you cut back a bit on your work hours? The house isn't clean even during the weekdays. Shouldn't you be keeping it tidy? Today's Dave's turn to tidy up. So please tell Dave. How could you? Like making your hardworking husband clean the house. I work outside too. We both work, so both of us should share household chores." Even though mother-in-law understands the concept of both partners working, she firmly believes that household chores are the wife's responsibility. That's probably why she thinks I'm pushing those duties onto my husband. My mother-in-law sighed deeply, looking exasperated. "Akron, there's a difference in income between you and Dave. Isn't it common for the one earning less, like you, to handle more household chores? If you can't handle that, maybe you should consider being a stay-at-home wife. Unfortunately, our incomes are nearly the same. Plus, on Dave's income alone, it's impossible for me to stay home. That's why I have to work too. We both work full-time and get home around the same time. Yet you expect only me to handle the chores. It's not about when you get home. You clearly lack respect and gratitude towards your hardworking husband." Without waiting for my retort, my mother-in-law dramatically waved her hand. I waved my hand and let out another exasperated sigh. I wanted to retort that there was no gratitude or respect from my husband, but my mother-in-law wasn't even trying to listen to me anymore. Despite the ongoing conflict between my mother-in-law and me, my husband had never once listened to my side of the story. Instead, he teamed up with my mother-in-law, taking her side and blaming me. He stopped doing any chores around the house and started spending more time at my in-laws' home than at our own. Whenever I pointed this out, he'd lash out at me with incredible fury. So, I just let him go on like this. Fortunate as it was easier for me to let him spend time at my in-laws' house rather than being with him. Then, one day, I got off work early from a company nearby and was walking home. Just as I entered the apartment complex grounds, in the parking lot, it seemed my husband and my mother-in-law were about to head out, as our car was parked there. Oh, I didn't want to greet them, and was about to walk past quickly when suddenly the car lurched forward, aiming straight for me. I tried to dodge, but the car was too fast, and it knocked me off my feet. Thankfully, my head was spared, but my leg throbbed with pain. Though it seemed I'd grazed my skin against the rough asphalt when I fell, causing a deep cut. Blood streamed from my thigh. As I wondered what to do, feeling faint from the blood loss, I heard the sound of a car door opening. Out stepped only my husband. He left the passenger door open and began inspecting the area of the car that likely hit me. He didn't even look at me. He's in the driver's seat with a pale face, sat my mother-in-law, who made no move to get out. "Hey," I called out to my husband, who was still inspecting the front bumper. Finally, he stood up, still bleeding. I thought I needed to get to a hospital, but my husband turned away, walking toward the driver's side. "A tear's fine, not a scratch." "Mom, you okay?" Must have been a shock, right? "You good?" I was dumbfounded. Here I was, bleeding in front of him, and all he cared about was the car and my mother-in-law. At my mother-in-law's reassurance, my husband smiled warmly, about to get back into the car when finally, my husband looked at me. "Hey, don't just sit in the middle of the road. You're blocking cars, you know?" My husband didn't even show concern for me, and his careless remark made my anger explode. "Are you kidding me? You hit someone with your car and then talk to me like that. It's you who's messing around. You suddenly jumped out, and that's why I hit you. Then you blame my mom. By the way, what were you gonna do if the car got damaged?" At this point, I couldn't believe my husband. My husband was the same man I knew. He hit someone, causes injury, and then says it's the victim's fault. Without a word of concern, my husband gestured widely, signaling for me to move to the side of the road. Worried about the car after seeing someone bleed. "You saw me right in front of you, didn't you? It's on you for speeding into me. Who floors it in a parking lot anyway? What if it was someone else? Would you say the same? Fam, you're not a stranger. You're family. You get that if I hit you, I'm the one paying for the repairs. Hitting you doesn't benefit me a dime. You get that? What do you mean it doesn't benefit you? You were the one who hit me. Why am I the one being blamed?" As my husband and I argued, my mother-in-law, who had been in the driver's seat, finally got out of the car. My mother-in-law approached me, standing tall, looking down at me. "Catherine, do you know how much Dave's car costs? You come charging in and then have the nerve to speak like this. You should be apologizing first." I was completely dumbfounded, realizing firsthand what that expression meant. Even though she was the one who floored the gas pedal, causing the car to speed up, for some reason, my mother-in-law seemed to believe that I was the one who ran into them. "Why are you playing the victim? This happened because you weren't walking at the edge. Just like Dave said, this is on you." "That's right. It's on Catherine. Just go home and take care of the house. That's all you're good for now." I was at a loss for words. Both my mother-in-law and my husband insisted I had run into them at full speed. My head was spinning from their outrageous claims. Seeing me stunned, my husband forcefully dragged me to the side of the road. Ignoring my groans of pain, he just drove off. Soon after, someone rushed to my side. "Are you okay? I've called the police. Let's get you to a hospital." The person comforting me was a colleague who lived in the same apartment complex. I remembered she was off today, and while thinking about borrowing a towel or something because of the mess, my head started to spin again. Apparently, I had lost too much blood. I realized what had happened when I was getting treated in the hospital and recounted the events to the doctors. They told me I needed to be hospitalized for a few days, but I wasn't prepared for this at all. I wasn't sure if my husband was home to bring me things from our place. I didn't really want to rely on him even if he was there. Luckily, there was a gift shop in the hospital, so I asked the nurse to get the essentials for me. The moment I finished calling my company and expressing my gratitude to the colleague who had brought me there, my freshly turned off smartphone vibrated. It was a call from my husband. After me as teens, I hadn't planned on answering, but I accidentally tapped to answer since I had just been on a call with my colleague. I could hear my husband's voice. "You finally answered. My mom's in a bad situation because of you, and you dare to ignore calls from the family." "What? Who are you?" "There's no hit-and-run driver in my family," I replied firmly to my husband's accusations. "What? You too think my mom did a hit-and-run? Everyone in the neighborhood's talking about how my mom hit someone and fled. The cops might come. You reported it, didn't you?" "Apologized to them and to my mom." "Parts, but were she quitting and proves you and misunderstanding. She hit someone and drove away. That's hit and run. And for the record, I didn't report it. At yours when I told my agitated husband that it was my colleague who called the police after taking me to the hospital." I heard a faint click of his tongue. "Just clear it up with the police and it'll all be fine. Hurry up and get here. I gotta stay in the hospital. And weren't you sitting in the passenger seat? Do you really think I just randomly walked into the car and fell?" My husband's playing the victim comment pushed me to respond, and my husband paused for a moment. But then he began talking to me in a condescending tone. "Listen, Catherine, if everyone thinks my mom hit you by mistake, how do you think she'd feel? She might get so scared she won't drive again. That's just sad. I don't get what you're saying. I'd prefer someone who drives that dangerously to not drive at all. Why are you being like this? If you just tell the police you weren't looking either, it'll all work out. Don't families help each other out when things get tough?" His annoying tone made me sigh deeply. What you call family and what I call family seem different. "When I'm discharged, I'll be sending you divorce papers. The police want my statement too, so I'm gonna hang up." Whoa, why are we talking divorce over something between my mom and you? Be unable to bear his words. I hung up. To calm my boiling rage, I took several deep breaths, and as I planned my next steps, I decided to go back to my parents' house. To get to my parents' house, which is similar to an island off the coast of Maine, you have to take a plane and a ferry. Although it's far and challenging to get there, I couldn't hesitate any longer. I'd always planned and prepared for the divorce, so packing up my belongings wasn't an issue. I handed the keys to my house to my mother, who had come to the hospital room. If she could take out the belongings, I'd already packed during the weekdays. It was all good. During that time, the police came and questioned me. Amply after receiving the report, the apartment management company checked the parking lot security cameras and saw footage of me being hit. Because with the evidence, they said it would lead to the arrest of my mother-in-law, which was a relief. I think by the time I was discharged from the hospital, my mother-in-law had been arrested by the police. I heard that when the police went to question her at my in-laws' house, she tried to escape by pushing a police officer away. She was easily caught, and due to the risk of her fleeing, she was promptly placed into a patrol car. As for me, I didn't return home. Instead, I headed to my parents' house with the belongings my mother brought out. I had to quit my job, but I left in high spirits, planning to look for a new job in the city. Perhaps one reason for my positive mood was that when I went to my workplace to apologize and say goodbye, they kindly saw me off. And a few more days passed. Through my lawyer, I demanded a divorce from my husband, but he vehemently refused. What's more, he actually showed up at my parents' house in Nebraska. At the front door, my parents were holding my husband back. My husband kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, but there's already evidence, and there's no way my mother-in-law's crimes would just vanish now. My husband kept saying family over and over again, which made my father lose his temper and angrily slammed the front door shut. Damn fool. Don't you ever dare call my daughter a family again? Get the hell out of here. Through the window, I could see my husband still trying to force open the door. Suddenly, my husband turned around. At Chin, there stood some of the island's most intimidating and well-built uncles, staring at my husband with stern eyes. Seeing the looming figures approaching, my husband jumped and hurriedly ran towards the dock. He's probably waiting anxiously for the next ferry by now. Afterward, my husband and I managed to get our divorce finalized. Turns out the hit-and-run investigation wasn't only about my mother-in-law who was driving, but my husband who was in the car with her. Just unlike my mother-in-law, who was arrested while trying to flee from the police, my husband didn't try to run and was cooperative during the investigation. So they went with a home investigation approach, which meant he wasn't detained by the police. However, since he left home, even if it was just a plane and a ferry ride away, he was considered a flight risk and was detained, just like my mother-in-law. It seemed like he wanted to show some sign of remorse by agreeing to my divorce request. But if we're gonna get the divorce finalized, I honestly didn't care about his feelings anymore. The law became the hottest gossip in the neighborhood. Phrases like the jerk who's more worried about his hit-and-run mom than his injured wife, or the lowest of the low, a mother-son hit-and-run duo, or like mother, like son, both got arrested, were the talk of the town. Since it became challenging to contact my husband and my mother-in-law, I had no choice but to rely on a lawyer. But I never wanted to see their faces again, so it's no big deal. Just moving forward, there's going to be a lot of back and forth with my husband and my mother-in-law's insurance company, police investigations, and deciding whether or not to press charges. I just hope to settle everything quickly and never have to be in touch with them again.